The helicopter was somewhere above the building, its rotors a low, steady thrum in the ceiling. It blended with the hum of vents and monitors, but Lieutenant Nora Blake could feel it in the floor under her shoes as she stepped into the intensive care corridor of Sterling Military Medical Center. Fluorescent lights ran in a straight line overhead. The air smelled of antiseptic coffee gone bitter and the faint metallic trace that never quite left a trauma unit. Carts rattled past, wheels squeaking. Machines beeped their private codes behind half-closed doors. Nora walked to the nurses' station in the middle of the hall. Screens glowed with vital signs. A whiteboard held bed numbers and initials. Phones blinked with missed calls and waiting consults. Her badge caught the light when she stopped. LT Nora Blake, RN combat nurse. The laminated plastic was new, the woman wearing it was not. That the combat transfer, a resident murmured near the printer. Yeah, another replied. She looks 12. Nora ignored them. She read the board, taking in names, vent settings, drips. The rhythm of the place showed in the pattern more than the ink. Head nurse Denise Parks slid in beside her, a tablet under one arm. Her navy scrubs had seen several shifts. The pen behind her ear left a faint mark in her dark hair. Blake, she said, welcome to Alpha Side. You have bed 3, 5, 7, and 11, 4 vents, 1 new post-op, 1 old friend of the unit who will tell you how to do everything. Nora nodded. I will learn fast. Denise looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. Questions are allowed, she said. Pride is expensive here. Before Nora could answer, Dr. Michael Harrington reached the station. Shirt sleeves rolled tie, loosened, stethoscope looped around his neck. He carried an air of someone who had seen everything and did not plan on being impressed. Circle up, he said. Nurses and residents tightened around the desk. Nora stepped closer, folding her arms loosely, listening. We have our usual full house, Harrington said, scanning the tablet in his hand, plus 1 inbound medevac from Kandahar 10 minutes out. Until they land, nobody in these rooms dies. After they land, nobody from that bird dies either. Clear. There was a murmur of assent. His eyes moved around the group and landed on Nora. You are Blake, he said. Yes, sir. First shift in Sterling. Yes, sir. He glanced at her badge. Transfer from theater medicine. Forward surgical team, Nora said. Yes, sir. This is not a tent beside a runway, Harrington replied. In here we have labs, scans, protocols. We do not guess. We do not improvise. We follow the chain and we keep people alive long enough to leave my service. Understood. Understood, Nora said. He watched her, waiting for something in her face to give away challenge or attitude. It did not. He turned back to the board. All right, get back to it. The huddle dissolved. Denise handed Nora a thin stack of charts. Skim these, she said. At least know their allergies before they try to crash on you. Nora flipped through the pages. Names, drug lists, lab numbers. She had reached the second chart when the double doors at the end of the hall slammed open. An incoming gurney forced its way through, bumping the doors wide. The intercom chimed overhead. Trauma team to Bay 3. The helicopter thrum above shifted louder, closer. Nora dropped the charts on the counter, grabbed a pair of gloves, and fell in beside the paramedics pushing the stretcher. The patient was a staff sergeant, bare from the chest down, abdomen bundled in dressings already soaked through. His skin was pale, lips dry. Dog tags lay against his collarbone, clinking lightly with each jolt. Staff Sergeant Eli Cole 3-2, the paramedic called. Blast on Convoy Road, hypotensive at scene. 2 units in from flight medics, still dropping. Belly firm. Suspected major vessel. The trauma bay lights burned down on all of them. Monitors flicked on. Hands moved to IV lines, oxygen mask, blood bags. Nora leaned close enough to speak into Cole's ear. Sergeant Cole, you are at Sterling and San Antonio. You made it off the road. His eyes fluttered, trying to focus. My squad, he whispered. They out. You did not leave them, Nora said. Now stay here with us. Harrington stepped in at the foot of the bed, pulling on gloves. Report, he snapped. The paramedic repeated the details. Harrington nodded toward anesthesia. We are heading upstairs, he said. Prep for emergency laparotomy, labs type, and cross-call surgery. Nora peeled back the top dressings. Warm blood slid between her fingers. It did not spurt. It pulsed slow and heavy from somewhere she could not see. She pressed deeper, not to stop it entirely, but to feel where it came from. Torn tissue, slick surfaces, then a faint throb in the wrong place. The monitor chimed a warning. Blood pressure numbers dropped again. Clamp, she said. The surgical tech beside her hesitated. His gaze flicked toward Harrington. Clamp, Nora repeated. Harrington looked up. What are you planning, Lieutenant? He asked. Stopping the leak, she answered. The tech placed a hemostat into her palm. The metal was cool through the glove. Nora slid it along the path her fingers had taken, following that tiny pulse. Years of practice in places with canvas walls and sand floors had taught her to trust touch more than any screen. There, a small steady beat where it did not belong. She closed the clamp. The blood slowed. The gauze did not darken as quickly. On the monitor, the downward slide of numbers paused, then edged up by a few fragile points. The air in the room changed. The tight, thin silence loosened. Somebody adjusted a drip. Somebody else called to say the patient was still worth opening. Harrington watched the monitor, then Nora's hands. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. "Forward team north of Basra," she said. "We did not have time to wait for labs." He held her gaze for a moment, expression unreadable, then gave a short nod. "All right," he said. "Get him to the OR. Do not lose what you just bought him." They rolled Cole out toward the elevators. The smell of blood thinned, washed over by antiseptic. Nora slipped off her gloves, dropped them into the bin, and flexed her fingers. "You know," Denise said from the doorway, "most people at least pretend to breathe after a case like that." Nora let out a breath she had not noticed she was holding. "I will put it on my list," she said. "Good idea," Denise replied. "Take 5. Break room is down the hall. Coffee is terrible, but it is hot." The break room held 2 small tables, 4 chairs, and a humming vending machine. A narrow window showed the hospital parking lot and a slice of dark sky. The helicopter sound was faint here, just a distant vibration in the glass. Nora sat and stretched her legs. Her sneakers were no longer bright white. A dried streak near the toe marked where a drip had landed earlier. She wiped at it with a napkin, more from habit than hope. She took her wallet from her pocket and slid out a photo. The colors were fading at the edges. A helicopter marked Raven 6 hovered in the background rotor wash, kicking up dust. In the foreground, a younger Nora knelt over a soldier on the ground, hands pressed to his chest, jaw set. She looked at the picture until the vending machine hum blurred into the beat of rotors in her memory. The door opened. Denise came in with 2 paper cups. "I'm guessing you drink coffee," Denise said, setting one on the table. "Thank you," Nora said. She slid the photo back into her wallet. "Basra," Denise said. "That is what you told Harrington." "North of there," Nora answered. She wrapped her hands around the cup. Heat seeped through the cardboard. "Different valley, same sand." "It sticks," Denise said. "Oh, yes, Denise said. "Parts of it," Nora replied. "Mostly when the helicopters are close." From the hallway, a monitor alarm cut through the steady hospital noise. Denise tipped her head toward the door. "Alpha side keeps busy," she said. Nora stood. The dog tag in her pocket tapped once against her leg as she walked back into the corridor and toward the sound. The alarm came from bed 5. By the time Nora reached the doorway, the room was already crowded. A young man thrashed on the mattress, hands clawing at the air, eyes so wide the whites glowed under the fluorescent light. The monitor screamed a high-fast rhythm. A saline bag swung wildly above him. "Private Brooks," a nurse called, trying to pin his arm long enough to keep the IV from tearing loose. "Tyler, you need to hold still." He did not answer. His chest heaved. Sweat ran along his temples and into his short hair. The sheet lay twisted at his waist, his legs jerking in uneven kicks that rattled the bed frame. Nora stepped inside her shoulder, brushing the plastic curtain. The smell of sweat and lingering smoke hit her at once. It was faint, but it did not belong in a hospital room. It belonged to roads where vehicles burned. "What happened?" she asked. "Shrapnel removal earlier today," the older nurse at the bedside said, breathless from holding an arm and avoiding a swinging elbow. "Sedation wore off. He woke like this. Says they left someone. Vitals are climbing into the sky." The monitor agreed. Heart rate near the top of the screen, pressure numbers rising. The line of his breathing jagged and uneven. "Let go," Nora said quietly. The nurse blinked at her. "He will rip his line out." "Hold the line, not him," Nora answered. She moved to the head of the bed and lowered the rail with a soft click. In one smooth motion, she reached up and adjusted the overhead light so that it angled away from his face and onto the wall instead. The glare left his eyes. "Private Brooks," she said close enough that her voice did not have to be loud. "Tyler, look here." His gaze darted between the ceiling and some point just over her shoulder as if the walls had fallen away and he was seeing something very far off. His breath came in short, harsh pulls. "Tyler," she repeated, "how many are in your squad?" His focus snapped to her mouth, then her eyes. It wavered, but it kept returning. 6, he choked. "No, 5, I do not know. There was fire, I could not see. They are still out there." His hand groped for something that was not there. The IV line trembled. Nora placed her palm on his shoulder. Firm, steady pressure over the muscle. "You are not out there," she said. "Listen to me. You are in Sterling. You are in Texas. The worst thing over your head right now is a fluorescent light. It is ugly, but it does not explode." He blinked. His chest kept heaving, but his breath began to catch on a different rhythm. "Where is my team?" he whispered. "Your team is with their medics now," Nora said. You did your job. Now this is your job. You match my breathing. She drew in air through her nose, slow and audible. She let it out through her mouth in a long stream. Her hand on his shoulder rose and fell with her chest. In, she said. Out. He tried. The first breath came ragged. The second stuttered. The third found the shape of hers. That is it, she murmured. You hear that sound. She tilted her head toward the monitor. That beeping is your heart checking back in. Let it come down. The nurse at the IV watched her hands now free, except for a gentle hold on the tubing. The other stepped back half a pace, the air in the room easing. Tyler swallowed. A tear slid from the corner of one eye into his hair. I smell it, he said. The burning, the metal, I hear the... He cut off. The word hung there unnecessary. Nora heard it anyway. The rotors, the night, the moment when the noise told you whether anyone was coming. She tightened her grip on his shoulder. I know that smell, she said. I know the sound you are hearing. I have been on that road, not the same one, close enough. He stared up at her. You have seen it, he said. Enough, she replied. The monitor numbers dipped. Heart rate slid down a few beats, blood pressure followed. The alarm shifted from urgent shriek to dull chime, then silenced itself. Tyler took another breath. It matched hers. Are they alive? He asked. The question sounded younger than his face. Nora did not answer right away. She studied his pupils the way the tremor in his hands had faded to a faint shake. You got off the field, she said. That gives them a better chance. You are not going anywhere tonight. Neither am I. He nodded once. His eyes slipped shut, but his grip on consciousness did not fully loosen. His muscles stayed taut, then softened as sedative trickled back in at a slightly increased rate adjusted by the nurse who had been waiting for a calm moment to touch the pump. Vitals are stabilizing, the nurse said more to herself than to anyone else. Nora stepped back from the bed. Her hand left Tyler's shoulder slowly, fingers sliding away so he did not feel the contact vanish all at once. Outside in the hall, the general ICU hum resumed. Somewhere a phone rang twice and stopped. A cart squeaked past. At the sink in the corner, Nora turned on the water. It ran over her fingers in a clear, cold stream, washing away the clammy feel of his skin. Denise appeared at her side as if the same current that ran through the ward always brought her to the places where the air had just been tightest. You did not flinch, Denise said, watching Nora's hands. I did not need to, Nora replied. He was not bleeding. Not the patient's, Denise said. The story. Nora let the water run. It hit the steel basin with a steady hiss. I have heard worse, she said. You talk to him like you knew what it looks like when a truck burns, Denise said. Nora closed the tap. Droplets clung to her knuckles. She reached for a paper towel. You can smell it in here, she said, drying her hands. On his clothes, in his hair. Denise studied her face. Most people smell it and think of barbecues gone wrong, Denise said. You smell it and your pupils get smaller, not bigger. Nora dropped the paper towel into the bin. Do you want me to say I am fine? She asked. I want to know whether you are going to fall apart in the middle of a code, Denise said bluntly. I'm not, Nora said. I have done that already. Yay, somewhere else. Denise held her gaze for another long second, then nodded once. All right, she said. Locker room in 10. You have been on your feet since before Cole rolled in. I am aware, Nora said. I figured, Denise replied. Come find me. The locker room was a narrow space beneath a row of humming vents. Metal doors stood slightly ajar, most of them decorated with stickers or photos. The smell of cheap deodorant and starch hung in the air. Nora opened the locker assigned to her. Inside the top shelf held a folded sweater, a spare pair of scrubs, and a small black notebook. On the hook just below it, a single dog tag hung on its chain. Leo Martinez, SSGTUS Army. The letters were worn soft at the edges. The metal bore a faint ripple where it had bent once, then been straightened by someone in a hurry. Nora reached up and touched the tag with the tips of her fingers. It swung once, then settled. The door creaked behind her. Nice setup, Denise had said. Nora let the locker door stay open. She leaned back against the cool metal. You walk quiet, she replied. Occupational skill, Denise said. Her eyes drifted to the dog tag. Old friend. Nora hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Someone who hated hospitals, she said, but kept ending up near them. Denise stepped closer, careful not to crowd. She looked at the name, then at Nora. You were with him, she said. At the end, Nora answered. She closed her hand around the tag for a moment, then let it go. He is why I learned not to wait for lab results when someone is circling the drain. Denise did not ask for details. The fluorescent light hummed above them. Word travels fast, she said instead. Harrington saw what you did with Cole. He will not forget it, even if he pretends otherwise. I saw what I did with Cole, Nora said. He stayed alive. That matters more. You know how they talk out there, Denise said. She nodded toward the door and the hallway beyond it. Too confident, too calm. Acts like she has seen war. Nora smiled without humor. They are not entirely wrong, she said. That is why they resent it more, Denise replied. It is easier to dismiss someone who is bluffing. The locker room door opened again. A young nurse with a messy bun poked her head in, saw both of them, and froze. Sorry, she said. I did not mean to interrupt. You did not, Denise said. You need something. The young nurse nodded. Dr. Harrington is asking for Lieutenant Blake at the station. Nora straightened. Denise watched her catching the flicker that ran across her features and vanished. Tell him I'm on my way, Nora said. At the nurse's station, Harrington stood with his arms folded, watching a resident misinterpret a chest X-ray. The resident stumbled through an explanation about fluid lines and possible infection. Harrington corrected him with 3 short sentences and moved on. His attention shifted to Nora as she approached. You spoke to Brooks, he said without greeting. I did, Mosh. Nora replied. His numbers came down, Harrington said. No benzodiazepines yet, and his pressure is steady. He needed to be told where he is, Nora said. His head was still in the blast. Harrington regarded her. You think it is that simple, he said. No, Nora said. But I can start there. I do not have a prescription pad. The residents are uneasy, Harrington said. They said you talk to patients like a chaplain or a platoon sergeant. I talk like someone who wants them to keep breathing, Nora replied. He studied her face as if looking for the thing that tied her battlefield file to the woman in front of him. Field instincts are not always assets in here, he said finally. They can get in the way. They kept Cole alive, Debrede. Ho ho, Nora said. They did today, femme, Harrington said. I am not arguing that. I'm telling you this unit runs on more than gut and luck. You are not in a valley with a flashlight anymore. Nora glanced toward the row of rooms where monitors glowed in the dim. The helicopter still turned slow circles in the sky above the roof. She could feel the vibration running through the bones of the building. No, she said, I am not. Harrington followed her gaze. You want to stay here, he said. It was not quite a question. I asked to come here, she answered. Then understand something, he said. Your record out there earns you a chance in here. It does not excuse you from being careful. Nora met his eyes. I am careful, she said, in a different way than you are. He did not like that answer. She saw it, but he said nothing more. He turned away to answer a pager that had begun to vibrate at his hip. Denise came to stand beside Nora at the station. She placed a chart on the counter and flipped it open. You did fine, Denise said under her breath. I did not know I was being tested, Nora replied. You are, Denise said, every time you walk down this hall, but you already knew that. Nora looked at the board again. Names, room numbers, symbols for vents and drips and isolation. A pattern she was still learning. A pattern she would have to learn fast. Behind the walls, behind each closed door, hearts beat at different paces. She could hear the monitors if she listened. She could hear the distant thrum above the ceiling. All of it folded into the same low noise that marked the place where people came when the world outside had done its worst. The lull did not last. For a few hours, the unit slipped into a rhythm that felt almost ordinary for a place that only saw emergencies. Medications were hung and adjusted. Families called. Residents rounded with clipboards held like shields. Nora moved from bed to bed, reading monitors, checking dressings, answering short, anxious questions with shorter, steady answers. By late afternoon, the light slanting through the high windows in the corridor had turned the color of watered honey. The distant helicopter noise had faded, replaced by ground traffic and the occasional rumble of a freight train beyond the base. Nora was documenting a medication change when the overhead speakers cracked alive. Attention, incoming medevac, multiple casualties from Kandahar AO. All trauma personnel report to intake. Repeat, all trauma personnel. Pens froze mid-word. Conversations broke cleanly in half. A nurse stepped out of a patient's room still holding a blood pressure cuff and did not seem to notice. Denise was already in motion. Alpha side, let us move, she called. Bay 1 through 4 are priority. Clear your lines. If you are not essential, you are out of the way. She looked at Nora. With me, she said. They pushed through the double doors at the end of the hall and into the intake area. The space smelled like cold air and exhaust. Orderlies rolled out extra gurneys. A respiratory therapist checked and rechecked oxygen tanks, the hiss of pressure valves sharp in the air. Through the glass of the ambulance bay doors, the sky looked washed out and bleached. Then the helicopter appeared, hovering just above the landing pad rotors, chopping the light into fragments. Dust lifted swirling in rings around the pad and streaking the glass. The doors opened with a rush of air that carried jet fuel and sweat and something burnt that had nothing to do with cooking. Medics poured through the entrance with stretchers. Their faces were set in that tight, controlled look that told Nora they had already seen enough today. Lieutenant Blake, someone called. We have 4, 2 stable enough for surgery, 1 borderline, 1 circling. She met the medic halfway. Give me the one circling, she said. They wheeled him toward the bay, too. He was young shaved head, mottled with soot uniform cut away across his torso. Bandages covered his chest and just below his ribs. The dressings were soaked through in an angry spreading red. Sergeant Kyle Monroe, the medic said, 23. Truck hit something on the road, lost pressure fast. 2 units on the flight. Vitals were holding, then started tanking again 10 minutes ago. We are out of tricks. The medic's voice cracked on the last sentence. He stepped back only when Nora steered the gurney into position. On my count, Nora said. 1, 2, 3. They lifted Monroe from the field stretcher onto the hospital bed. The mattress sighed. The monitor took up his rhythm painting numbers and curves on a screen that did not yet know how close he was to falling off its edge. Pressure low, heart rate high but uneven, oxygen saturation dipping lower than anyone liked. Get a large bore in the left, Nora said. Hang 2 more units. Someone get his chart started. I want a full panel sent with the first tubes, but do not wait for results to call surgery. A resident nodded and began filling vials with shaking hands. Nora pressed her fingers gently along Monroe's neck. The skin was cool and clammy. Under her fingertips, the carotid beat jumped. It was not a steady thump. It flickered in odd, irregular twitches like something was catching and skipping in there. She had felt that pattern before, out in the dust, in the back of trucks that rattled their way toward landing zones that might never receive them. He is going to crash, Nora said. The surgical tech at her elbow shot her a look. We are getting labs, he said. Dr. Harrington is scrubbed in upstairs. He will be down. Labs will tell us what is already obvious, Nora said. She peered under the bandages, working just enough to see where the blood came from. It was not spraying. It seeped thick and dark in slow pulses that matched the strange rhythm in his neck. He is bleeding internally. He is heading for arrest. The monitor beeped a warning. Heart rate dipped by a few shallow beats. The door behind them swung open. Harrington strode in, still in his OR cap mask, hanging loose around his throat. His eyes took in the scene in one practice sweep. Report, he said. The resident launched into numbers and values. Halfway through, his voice wavered. Sergeant Monroe, 23, Nora cut in not unkindly. Blast injury on Convoy Road, pressure in the gutter despite fluids. Neck twitch suggests he is minutes away from code. He needs epinephrine now and the OR ready to open him before his heart forgets what it is supposed to do. Harrington frowned. We do not push epi on this profile until we know what his catecholamines are doing, he said. We wait for labs. I'm not going to trigger a lethal arrhythmia because someone got overexcited. It is not excitement, Nora said. It is pattern recognition. The tech held an unopened vial of epinephrine between 2 fingers. His eyes flipped back and forth between Nora and Harrington as if watching a match no one wanted to referee. The monitor bleeped again. The heart rate number slid lower. The line of the waveform lost a little of its height. Nora looked at Monroe's face. His eyelids fluttered. His lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. A thin foam gathered at the corner of his mouth. He did not look like a soldier now. He looked like every patient she had ever watched hover on that narrow ledge between here and nowhere. Doctor, Nora said, he will not make it to the lab results. That is not your call, Harrington answered. His voice was flat, but his eyes were hard. You are a nurse. You follow orders. Another small drop in the numbers. The alarm changed its tone, becoming a continuous high whine that scraped along the inside of Nora's skull. Somewhere behind the sound, another noise began to rise. It came from memory, not the room. Rotor blades turning fast enough to blur, men shouting over them, someone calling her name and telling her it was time to go, that they had done all they could. She saw Leo's face for a second, dust in his eyebrows, blood at the corner of his mouth, the weight of his dog tag in her palm. The alarm grew louder. The present pulled her back. Lieutenant, Harrington said sharply, stand down, we wait. Nora heard the order. She also heard the silence that would follow if she obeyed. She saw Monroe's number sliding into nothing. She reached for the vial. Give that to me, Harrington snapped. Nora stepped between him and the med cart, her back to him. The movement was small and it contained an entire decision. She drew up the epinephrine with quick, sure hands. The syringe filled clear liquid drawing past the markings. Her fingers did not shake. She did not rush. She simply did not waste time. Blake, Harrington said. It was almost a shout. Nora leaned over Monroe's chest. I have you, she said, not to Harrington, not to anyone watching. Stay. She pushed the needle in at the point she had already mapped in her mind. The plunger went down in one smooth push. She placed the empty syringe aside and set her hands on his sternum. Check compressions, she said. 1, 2, 3, 4. She counted under her breath, pressing in time with the numbers, letting muscle memory take over. The room narrowed to the feel of cartilage and bone under her palms, the slight give and recoil the way the skin warmed under friction. The alarm screamed, then suddenly it broke. A single loud beep cut through the noise. The monitor line, which had begun to flatten, jerked. Then it rose again in jagged peaks. "Sinus tack," the resident whispered. "He is back in sinus tack." Pressure numbers climbed. They were still low, but now they were climbing. The tech who had been frozen with the IV bag finally moved, checking the line for leaks. A respiratory therapist adjusted a ventilator setting with renewed purpose. Nora slowed her compressions and stopped when the monitor showed that Monroe's heart had taken its own rhythm back. She stepped away, breathing heavy for the first time since she had entered the bay. Harrington stood at the foot of the bed. His hands were fists at his sides. A muscle jumped in his jaw. "You disobeyed a direct order," he said quietly. "He has a pulse," Nora said. Her voice was low, almost calm. "He did not 2 minutes ago." "You could have killed him," Harrington said. "You played roulette with a heart that was already failing." "And if I had done nothing," Nora replied, "we would be putting a sheet over his face." The resident took an involuntary step back. Everyone in the room seemed suddenly very focused on their tasks, eyes on tubes and screens and anything that was not the confrontation. "Orr is ready," someone called from the doorway almost too loudly. "They can take him now." "Move, Piquant Eve," Harrington said. They rolled Monroe out a blur of wheels and swinging IV bags. Nora stayed where she was. The bay felt bigger once the bed was gone. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. Harrington turned toward her. "You are finished in this unit until I say otherwise," he said. "Hand your patients over to Denise and report to the conference room in 20. Nora opened her mouth, then closed it again. There would be a time to speak. This did not feel like that time. "Yes, sir," she said. He left without waiting to see if she would follow. For a moment, Nora stood alone, hands still tingling from compressions. Then she reached for the sink. Water rushed over her fingers, red, smearing, then running clear. She stared at her hands. In her mind, they were covered not in Monroe's blood, but in sand and something darker. The noise of the unit faded. The room shifted. She was back in the valley. The air there had been so hot it burned through the thin fabric of her uniform. The sky was a white sheet. The helicopter had not touched down yet. It circled somewhere above its noise, a promise shouted over gunfire. Leo lay on the ground at her knees, dust sticking to the sweat on his neck. Her hands pressed into a wound she could not see clearly. Blood welled up between her fingers with every heartbeat. "Blake," someone yelled. "Bird is inbound, 30 seconds. She had ignored the voice. "Stay with me," she had told Leo. "You do not get to check out here." He had tried to smile. It had come out as a grimace. "Always so bossy, kikherensite." He had managed it. Rotor wash had blown grit into her eyes. She had blinked it away and kept counting under her breath. Each number tied to a pressure, a hope, a plea. The helicopter had finally landed in a storm of dust. The medics had run with a stretcher. "We have to go," one of them had shouted. "He's not stable enough for transport." "He will not be stable enough if we put him down," Nora had said. She had felt the pulse falter under her palms. The small twitch at the neck had changed just like Monroe's. In the end, it had not been her call. Leo's heart had simply stopped. Her hands had kept moving for a few seconds after the monitor on the field kit had gone to a flat, solid tone. Someone had pulled her back. Someone had put a tag in her hand, warm metal with his name on it. They had loaded other men onto the bird. A medic had grabbed her arm. "You are done," he had said. "Get on." She had refused until the last stretcher was up. When she finally climbed aboard, she had done it with Leo's dog tag, wrapped so tight in her fist, the edge of the metal had cut her skin. The conference room door clicked shut, like the door of the trauma bay, soft and final. The fluorescent light here buzzed louder. A long table sat in the center, surrounded by chairs. A pot of coffee steamed on a sideboard. The smell was burnt and thin. Harrington sat near the far end, a tablet in front of him. Beside him was the hospital's deputy chief of medicine, a gray-haired colonel, whose expression had settled into something like permanent skepticism. Denise took a seat closer to the middle, arms folded loosely. Nora chose the chair opposite Harrington. She sat with her back straight, hands resting on her knees. "You know why you are here," Harrington said. "I do," Nora replied. "State it," the colonel said. "I administered epinephrine against a direct order," Nora said. "I initiated compressions without waiting for lab confirmation." "You violated protocol," Harrington said. "You set a precedent that will be very hard to walk back when every nurse in this unit thinks they can overrule a physician in a crisis." Denise spoke before Nora could. "She also got Monroe back," Denise said. "He was coding in front of all of us. The labs would have confirmed that, eventually." "This is not about whether the sergeant is alive at this moment," the colonel said. His voice was tired but precise. "This is about how we run a disciplined unit." Nora looked at him. With respect, sir, she said, I think that is exactly what this is about. The colonel raised an eyebrow. Explain, he said. A disciplined unit does not watch someone die because they are afraid of being wrong, Nora said. It does not hide behind labs when the body in front of them is already telling them what is happening. There are rules for why we do what we do, Harrington said. You do not know the cascade of events that one dose can trigger. I know the cascade that follows a systole, Nora said. I have run through it enough times. The colonel tapped a finger against the table. It made a dry, hollow sound. You are recently out of theater, he said. That can warp judgment. Yes, sir, Nora said. It can also sharpen it. Out there, if you hesitate, people die. In here, they die more slowly, but the end result is the same. Denise cleared her throat softly. I have watched a lot of nurses break under less, she said. Blake is not reckless. She's fast. There is a difference. She went against a direct order, Harrington repeated. That cannot pass without consequence. Silence settled for a moment. The hum of the vents filled it. The colonel finally sighed. Sergeant Monroe is in the OR, you kick, he said. If he comes out of that room with a heartbeat, this conversation looks different than if he does not. He looked at Nora. Until we know you are off primary duty, he said. Charting only. You do not make medication decisions. You do not lead codes. Understood, Nora said. Harrington seemed dissatisfied but did not argue. The meeting broke. Chairs scraped softly as they stood. Outside the corridor looked the same as before. Nurses walked past with charts, residents leaned over computer screens, a cleaner pushed a mop bucket down the hall. Nora did not head for a computer station. Instead, she turned toward the ICU again. Monroe's room was quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors and the soft sigh of the ventilator. He lay pale under the sheets, an artless collection of tubes and wires connecting him to the machines that stood guard. Nora stepped inside. She checked his pulse out of habit, fingers light on his wrist. It beat there, thin but present. She picked up the dry erase marker from the small board on the wall beside his bed. Space was usually reserved for allergies and reminders. She wrote in neat blue letters, You are here, keep fighting, NB. She capped the marker and placed it back. For a moment she watched his chest rise and fall in time with the machine. The pulse under her fingers matched the rhythm of the monitor. Somewhere above the ceiling, a helicopter passed by its rotors, rumbling softly in the bones of the building. Nora let the sound wash through her. Then she stepped out of the room and let the door fall shut behind her with a quiet click. By the time the sun came up over Sterling the next morning, Sergeant Monroe had a heartbeat of his own. The word spread in pieces. An anesthesiologist mentioned it at the coffee urn. A scrub nurse said he had squeezed a hand in recovery. A resident announced with a mix of relief and surprise that his post-operative labs were holding steady. Nora heard it all from the edges of conversations. She sat at a computer terminal, entering notes, her access clipped back to charting and routine checks. Her badge read the same as it had the day before. The way people glanced at it did not. Twice residents stopped beside her as if meaning to say something about the trauma bay and then thought better of it. A third time, one of them cleared his throat. Monroe is asking about the nurse with the field kit hands, he said. In case you wanted to know. Nora did not look away from the screen. I heard he is doing better, she said. Yeah, the resident replied. He is. He walked away, the unspoken hanging between them. Near noon, the overhead speaker chimed. It was the softer tone reserved for announcements that were not emergencies. All staff be advised du voice said. Command has authorized a visit from General Elias Grant, United States Army. He will be touring Sterling Military Medical Center this afternoon with emphasis on the trauma and intensive care units. Unit heads prepare your teams. A low current ran through the ward. Conversations rose and fell, half jokes and half planning. 4 stars, someone muttered. That is a lot of uniform. That is a lot of cameras, says. Another answered. At the nurse's station, Denise scanned an email on the screen and let out a breath between her teeth. Here we go, she said. Harrington is going to iron his tie. As if summoned, Harrington stepped into the station a moment later. His lab coat was buttoned all the way, his expression set. Listen up, Ike, he said. The nearby chatter quieted. General Grant is not here to watch us scramble. He is here to see why we get the outcomes we do. That means this place looks like it knows what it is doing. He ticked off points, charts up to date, equipment squared away, no unattended alarms, no loose gossip within earshot of a visiting entourage. His gaze landed on Nora. When he comes through this unit, Harrington said, you stand at attention with the rest of us. You speak if spoken to and only about clinical matters that involve you. Is that understood? Nora met his eyes. Yes, sir, she said. He held her look for a second longer than necessary, then turned away to brief a group of residents on how not to embarrass him. The building shifted in small ways as the hour drew closer. Floors were mopped twice. Dieu vous sait. A maintenance tech on a ladder retaped a loose wire that had been dangling from the ceiling for weeks. Someone replaced a flickering bulb without being asked. From the window at the end of the corridor, Nora saw the line of dark vehicles pull into the circular drive. Security stepped into position. A thin crowd of administrative staff gathered at the entrance, their visitor badges bright against their suits. The first SUV door opened. A soldier stepped out to scan the area, then another. Then General Elias Grant climbed from the back. He was taller in person than he looked in the framed photos on the hospital's walls. The Texas sun caught on the rows of ribbons on his chest. His hair was cropped close and gray at the temples. His posture carried the easy weight of someone long used to standing in front of other people and being believed. He disappeared into the building. A few minutes later, the murmur from the main lobby rolled down the halls like a wave. Staff lined up along the ICU corridor, nurses in fresh scrubs, residents with their coats as white as paper. Denise took her place near the front beside Harrington. Nora stood further down near the last room opposite a cart parked neatly against the wall. She smoothed a meaningless wrinkle from her scrub top. Her fingers brushed the pocket where Leo's dog tag rested. The metal was cool under the fabric, a small solid weight. The sound of polished shoes grew louder on the tile. Conversation and footsteps. A clipped voice that belonged to an aide listing names and roles in a low tone. General Grant came into view flanked by 2 officers and the hospital administrator. Cameras followed at a respectful distance, a local news crew judging by the logo on the microphone. He stopped at each person in the line, offered a handshake, asked a brief question. How many years in nursing? 3rd year of residency, sir. What is your role in the trauma chain? His questions were simple, but his attention made them feel heavier. At Harrington, he paused a moment longer. You are the attending for Alpha, Grant said. Yes, sir, Harrington replied. Dr. Michael Harrington, we handle most of the critical admissions from overseas here. Appreciate what you do, Grant said. The fight does not end at the flight line. He moved on. Nora watched him come closer, patient by patient, staff member by staff member. She told herself he was just another decorated man in another hallway. Her heart did not agree. When he stopped in front of her, the crowd noise seemed to drop a notch. She straightened. Lieutenant Nora Blake, sir, she said. Combat nurse, ICU Alpha. His eyes found her name tag. For a moment, nothing moved. Then his expression changed as if a door had opened somewhere behind his gaze and let a memory flood through. Blake, he said. The single word held surprise and recognition. Sir, she answered. Kandahar Valley, he said softly. His eyes did not leave her face. Operation Raven Line. A faint ringing filled Nora's ears. The hallway, the cameras, the line of staff receded. There was dust. There was a valley floor littered with spent casings and torn packs. There was a helicopter that refused to land any faster, no matter how hard she willed it. Yes, sir, she said. Grant took half a step back. He looked down the line at Harrington, at Denise, at the ward. Then he raised his voice so that it carried to both ends of the corridor. Attention, Hickeyshort, he said. I want everyone here to hear this. Conversations in adjacent rooms died out. Even the machines seemed to quiet their beeping, settling into softer patterns. 3 years ago, Grant said, my unit walked into an ambush in a valley that should have been quiet. In the first half minute, 2 medics were down. 4 men were bleeding into the dirt. No air support, no clear way out. His gaze returned to Nora. She was there, he said. Lieutenant Blake. She stayed in that valley when every instinct should have told her to run for cover. He spoke without notes. The details were carved into him. She worked on my men with a field kit and a flashlight between her teeth, he said. No monitors, no labs, no backup. Just her hands and a stubborn refusal to let go. She kept 3 of them breathing for 40 minutes while we fought just to get a bird into the air. The reporter at the far end lifted his camera. The red light clicked on. Grant went on. When the helicopter finally landed, she was bleeding herself, he said. Shrapnel in her side. She could barely stand. The pilot told her to get on first. She refused until every wounded man was loaded. We had to haul her onto that bird like a duffel bag. There was a low, involuntary sound from someone in the line. It faded quickly. She woke up 3 days later in a field hospital, Grant said. The first thing she asked me was not about her own injuries. She asked, did they all make it? His voice stayed steady, but something caught at the edge of it. 2 of those men were my son's closest friends, he said. One of them was my godson. They are all alive today. He squared his shoulders. We are here touring this facility, he said. People keep telling me you have a rookie combat nurse, that you are not sure she belongs in the big leagues. He turned in a slow half circle, taking in the faces around him. I am here to tell you she has more time under fire than most surgeons in this country, Ampurik, he said. If anyone questions whether she belongs on the front line of care, they can bring that concern to me. He pivoted back toward Nora. Then, in the middle of the corridor with cameras rolling and nurses standing at attention, General Elias Grant lifted his hand to his brow. He saluted her. For a second, Nora forgot how to breathe. Her body knew what to do long before her mind caught up. She returned the salute, her hand coming up in a crisp line palm angled just right. Her fingers did not tremble. The moment stretched. It settled into the walls, into the floors. One by one, as if pulled by a shared current, others along the line followed. Denise's hand came up. The colonel beside the administrator raised his. Even Harrington, after a heartbeat's hesitation, brought his hand to his brow. The reporter's cameras clicked and whirred. Light flashed against metal and glass. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped in steady time with a heart that refused to stop. Grant lowered his hand. He stepped closer to Nora, his voice dropping back to a more private register. "I never got to say thank you," he said. "You did, sir," Nora replied, "when your men walked off that bird on their own power. That was their work, and yours, Kaz," he said. "Do not try to give it away." He reached into the pocket of his jacket and drew out a coin about the size of his palm. It was dark metal, the edges worn smooth. An insignia of crossed arrows and a dagger gleamed faintly in the etched surface. "This is a Special Operations Challenge coin," he said. "Raven Line has a set. Every man you pulled out of that valley carries one." He placed it in her hand. The weight was small. The meaning was not. "You have earned this more times than I can count," he said. "You carry it if you want it." Nora closed her fingers around the coin. The cool metal pressed against the calluses on her palm, where gurney rails and field stretchers had rubbed. "Yes, sir," she said. The administrator moved forward, then eager to steer the tour along its prepared path. Questions from the reporter buzzed at the edge of the group. "General, what do you say to critics who do not trust young medical staff with critical decisions?" Grant glanced at the camera. "I say age tells you how long someone has been alive, he said, "not how much they have done with that time." The reporter scribbled. The aide signaled that the schedule was tight. The group began to move again down toward the operating suites. As they passed Harrington, Grant paused one last time. "You are her attending," he said. "Yes, sir," Harrington replied. "You are lucky," Grant said. "You have a blade in your hand that has already been tempered. Do not waste it." Then he was gone, carried away on the tide of escorts and questions. The corridor slowly returned to its usual noises. Nurses drifted back to their stations. Residents murmured to each other with a different tone than before. A few of them looked at Nora outright curiosity and something like respect in their eyes. Denise came to stand beside her. "You doing all right?" she asked. Nora looked at the coin in her hand. The light from the ceiling bounced off the metal in a thin, clean line. In her pocket, Leo's dog tag pressed against her thigh, another piece of metal with another story. "I am," Nora said. Harrington approached. His pace was slower than usual. The certainty that usually walked in front of him seemed to lag behind. "Lieutenant," he said. "Sir," Nora answered. He glanced at the coin, then at her face. "I owe you an apology, he said. "You do not," she replied. "I do," he insisted. "I judged you on what I could see and what I assumed. That was not enough. Yesterday I almost cost Monroe his life because I did not trust you. That is not going to happen again." Nora held his gaze. "You were trying to protect the patient," she said. "So was I." "And you did," Harper Tando said. "I will remember that next time my first instinct is to pull rank." He offered his hand. It was not the formal grip of a superior expecting deference. It was the open hand of one professional to another. She took it. "Thank you, sir," she said. When he walked away, Denise shook her head softly. "I have been here 20 years, Denise said. "I have never seen him say those words." Nora slipped the coin into the same pocket as the dog tag. Metal met metal with a soft clink. She looked down the hall where the echo of the general's visit still lingered in the corners. The ward was the same as it had been at dawn. The same fluorescent lights, the same worn floor, the same alarms waiting to sound. The eyes that watched her move through it were not the same. They framed the photograph a week later. It appeared on the wall of the main corridor without fanfare between the donor plaque and the faded poster about hand hygiene. Black and white glossy, the image caught General Grant mid-salute and Nora in that split second of stillness when her own hand had just reached her brow. Underneath a small metal plate carried 4 words. "Courage has no rank." Staff stopped when they passed it. A few took pictures on their phones. Some just looked for a moment, their faces unreadable, then moved on. Nora saw it on her way in from the parking lot, coffee in one hand, her other hand in her pocket around the shape of the challenge coin. She paused long enough to recognize her own profile and then kept walking. There were charts to sign. There was a shift to cover. Change did not come with a ceremony. It came in the way residents asked her opinion on plans instead of informing her of them. It came in the way a younger nurse stepped a little closer during a code not to hide but to see. One morning, Harrington handed Nora the printed schedule for the next month. His handwriting crawled across the margins. Head combat nurse position is open, he said. ICU, U Alpha. She read the lines. Her name sat beside the title in clean type. When did that happen? She asked. Administration was waiting until after the general left, Harrington said. They wanted to be sure the ward did not collapse if your head got too big. His attempt at humor came out dry. Did it? Nora asked. Apparently not, he said. They asked for a recommendation. I wrote yours. She looked up. Thank you, she said. Do the job well, Harrington replied. Make it easier for the next one who comes in with a record no one understands. Word of the new title spread light and thin. There were nods in hallways, a few claps on the shoulder. Denise brought a paper cup from the cafeteria and set it on Nora's desk. Promotion coffee, she said. Tastes the same as the regular kind. Nora smiled. It feels different, she said. Good, Denise answered. You will need it. With the new role came a request from higher up. The hospital wanted a training track for nurses heading into combat and for those coming back. Someone had to design it, someone who had stood in both places. Nora found herself in a classroom 3 floors above the ICU, in front of 10 sets of young eyes. They wore fresh scrubs and expressions that hovered between eagerness and unease. She picked up a marker and wrote 2 words on the whiteboard. First duty. She turned back to the group. Who is it, she asked. A young man in the front raised his hand. To the chain of command, he said. Important, Nora said, but not first. A woman at the back spoke up. To the rules, she said, protocol. Also important, Nora said, still not first. They looked at one another as if the answer might be written on someone's face. It is to the patient, Nora said. To the person under your hands. That is who you show up for. That is who you argue for when you have to. That is who you keep in mind when you are tired and angry and everyone else has gone home. She saw a few heads dip as if the words had clicked into a space that was waiting for them. That does not mean you throw rules away, she said. It means you learn them well enough to know when they help and when they slow you down. A hand went up. What do you do, a woman with freckles asked, if the doctor disagrees with you, like really disagrees? You present your evidence, Nora said. You stay calm, you say what you see and what you think it means. If they still do not hear you, you document that you spoke up. And if it is an emergency, the woman asked, and there is no time. Nora thought of Monroe, of the weight of the syringe in her hand, of the silence in the conference room afterward. If it is truly that tight, she said, you make the call you can live with. Then you carry whatever comes with it. The room was quiet for a heartbeat. Then pens started moving again. After class, most of the group filed out together, talking in low voices. One stayed behind. She was small, with dark hair twisted into a knot, her badge still shiny at the edges. She lingered near the door until Nora began wiping the board. Lieutenant Blake, the young nurse said, Do you have a minute? I do, Nora said. The nurse stepped closer. I almost left last month, she said. I had a patient on nights. He crashed fast. We did everything, but it was not enough. Her hands twisted the edge of her notebook. I could not stop seeing his face, she said. I thought maybe I was not cut out for this. Nora listened. She did not interrupt. Then someone showed me that article, the nurse said. The one about the general and you. I kept reading that part where you kept asking if they had made it. I figured if someone like you still worries about the ones you lost, maybe it is not just me. Maybe it is part of the job. She looked embarrassed after the rush of words, as if she had said too much. Nora opened her locker later and looked at Leo's dog tag. It hung where it always had a small piece of metal on a chain, letters worn down by time and the touch of her hand. She took it off the hook and held it out to the nurse. This belonged to a staff sergeant, Nora said. He did not make it. I carried it after that. Not because I enjoy losing, because I needed to remember why I show up, why I stay when it is hard. The nurse's eyes widened. I cannot take that, she said. You are not, Nora said. You are holding it for a minute. She waited until the nurse's fingers closed around the tag. It will not get lighter, Nora said. The memory, you just get stronger around it. You learn to let it push you forward instead of down. The nurse nodded slowly. She looked at the name on the tag, then gave it back carefully. Thank you, she said. Get some sleep when you can, Nora replied. A few nights later, Nora sat alone in her small office off the ICU. Papers covered half the desk. A lamp cast a circle of warm light that did not quite reach the corners. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from a number she had memorized after the first call. Heard about the new position, Grant wrote. Raven Line approves. Below that was another message. I thought you would want to know. 2 of the men from that valley got married last year. One just had a daughter. They named her Nora. She read the sentences twice, then a third time. A quiet heat rose behind her eyes. On the desk, the challenge coin lay beside the dog tag and a folded piece of paper. Grant had handed her the letter a month after his visit, signed by 3 hands with uneven pens. Thank you for not letting go, it said in 3 different scripts. She touched each object in turn, then slid them into the top drawer. Not hidden, just kept close. The year turned. On a spring afternoon, clouds stacked themselves in soft towers over the Army Medical Academy. A sea of chairs filled the auditorium, occupied by men and women in dress uniforms, their shoes shining, their faces expectant. Backstage, Nora adjusted the silver star on her chest. The ribbon lay against the dark blue of her jacket. Her hands were steady. The dean of the academy finished his introduction and looked toward her. Lieutenant Nora Blake, he said, combat nurse head of ICU Alpha at Sterling, and someone many of you already know from your feeds, is our keynote today. The applause felt more like weather than a directed thing. It flowed around her as she walked out to the podium. She looked out over the crowd. So many shoulders squared, so many eyes bright and unlined. She remembered watching similar faces from a hospital bed, once her own body full of stitches and medication. The microphone waited. When I walked into my first ICU, she said, they called me too young, too green, too untested. A ripple of recognition moved through the audience. They were right about some of it, she said. I was young. I was green about hospital forms and computer systems. I did not know where anything was stored. A few chuckles eased the room. I did know what it looked like when someone was about to die, she said. I knew what it felt like when the air around you told you that you were down to seconds. That knowledge did not fit neatly into anyone's expectations. She let the words hang for a moment. You are going to walk into rooms where people have already decided who you are, she said. They will decide based on your age, your rank, your face, your accent, your last name. You cannot control that. Pens moved across programs on laps. Some just watched. What you can control is what you do in that room, she said. How carefully you listen, how clearly you speak, how steady your hands stay when everything else shakes. She saw a row of future nurses in one section, uniforms, crisp caps, tilted at identical angles. One of them had the same freckled nose as the woman who had stayed after her class months ago. You will not win every fight, Nora said. You will not save every person. Some names will stay with you in the quiet hours. She thought of Leo, of Monroe, of Ntavufegi, of Tyler, of the faces in the Raven Line letter. But the work is to keep showing up, she said, to pay attention, to be the person someone is relieved to see when everything has gone wrong. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. When she stepped away from the podium, the applause rose slowly and then deepened, filling the corners of the hall. She did not look back to see if anyone had stood. It was enough to know the sound was there. Outside, the sky had shifted from bright to a softer blue. In the distance, a helicopter moved across it, a small shape against the clouds. The air carried the faint vibrato of its rotors. General Grant found her on the academy lawn. He wore a lighter uniform today, his hat under his arm. You clean up well, he said. He said. You too, sir, she replied. He handed her an envelope heavier than a letter. From the academy, he said. The academy, he said, something about appreciation. She tucked it under her arm without opening it. How is Monroe? She asked. Back on his feet, Grant said. He sent me a photo last week, running beside a formation yelling at privates. Looks annoyingly healthy. Nora smiled. Good, she said. Grant followed her gaze to the sky where the helicopter had already passed out of sight. You still hear them when it is quiet? He asked. Sometimes, Nora said. He nodded. Me too, he said. They stood there for another minute, boots in the trimmed grass, the academy buildings casting long shadows. Eventually, he squeezed her shoulder once and walked away, called by some other obligation. A group of cadets jogged past, laughing about something only they could hear. One of them saw her and straightened. Good afternoon, ma'am, he called. Afternoon, she answered. She watched them disappear down the path, then turned her own steps back toward the building. The day would end. Someone somewhere was rolling into a trauma bay under 2 bright lights. Someone else was learning to count compressions under their breath. In the quiet before the next thing, with the faint echo of rotors still in the air, Nora walked on. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.